Hello and welcome! In this video I want to show you how I did the new LEGO stop motion video and used Blender for compositing. This is the first single of the album The Palette Mask is Talking of martial arts, where I'm proud to be the bassist. If you haven't seen the video or listened to the album, check it out, the links are down in the description. So what do you need? A singer with a mask, collecting the band as LEGO figures, and a stage, and a bar, and a backstage area, and a large diverse crowd. A flat surface you will not need for a couple of weeks. For the background I used a green screen cloth, perfectly folded over some chemistry books. It also works with other books, but I really recommend chemistry books. Later in Blender we will remove the green screen and the chemistry books and build a very simple background. For the lighting I used two softboxes to get a homogeneously lit scene and green screen. We'll add the disco lighting and the foggy atmosphere in Blender later as well. Then you take your camera. I used a Nikon 5500 DX with either a 50mm prime lens for the wide shots or a 300mm macro lens for the close-ups. Mounted on the tripod or somewhere stable, and try not to touch or move it in the process. Also, a remote control is extremely helpful, and I broke two in the process. And then start animating. Choose a shot by positioning your camera and pose your character. Make a photo, pose your character, take a photo. Pose your character, take a photo, pose your character, and take a photo. It took me 7 days with 6 to 8 hours each day to take roughly 1900 photos for this video. A good tip for music videos is to keep the beat in mind. I used a specific pattern on the drummer to keep the beat. Stick up, a bit forward, a lot forward, a bit onto the drums, a bit up, a lot up, and to the start position. This amounts to 6 steps, which is an equivalent of half a second at 24 frames, and each pick is visible 2 frames. I post all figures which are supposed to be moving in time relative to this beat, on up or down beat or multiples of this rhythm. The high resolution of the DSLR can help us minimize work. The high resolution allows later to zoom in into specific parts of the picture and get several shots out of the same animation sequence. So we have our performance now and some side stories. Let's do it. Let's do the rest in Blender. So the pictures out of camera look way too friendly and bright. We need more atmosphere. This is the general approach. In the first step we will remove the green screen, then we put a background behind it, and then we do relighting by mixing an underexposed and a normal exposed picture controlled by a light pattern generated in a Blender scene. First step, remove the green screen. I typically use the chroma key node in the beginning, sampled the green that is most prominent, and added more color key node, sampled the remaining green, and played with the tolerances for saturation, hue and value. I use typically several of those to remove all shades of green from my terrible green screen. Here in the train of nodes, I give the image to the next node, but in the end I will use the black and white mask. To this I sometimes add garbage masks when I have problems in the parts of the image. I also use erode and delayed to handle some of the edges until I got a clean black and white mask. So the green is removed, it's time for the background now. Go into the 3D viewport, delete the light, keep the cube, make the cube the size of a club, roughly, remove the ceiling and back. As material I used a brick texture fed into a color ramp, some bump, nothing special. It is not pretty, but it's dark in the back. Oh yeah, it's dark. Let's set the world already to very dark. Then we need to position the camera. It's very helpful to have a helper plane showing the clip. So add images as planes, choose one pic of the image sequence, position the plane that it completely blocks the camera view, and in the plane material add a texture coordinate node and use window as coordinates for the pictures. When you parent the plane to the camera, the plane follows the cam and you can choose the position of the camera in the scene. In this scene, flat on is enough. Only the video screen is important. This is only an image sequence fed into emission node. Don't forget to enable the emission render path that the screen can get some bloom later. In other scenes, like the bar, we have an angle, and this is more difficult. First fit the original lens and the blender lens. Try to have similar dimensions, keep those values consistent. This will also help the depth of field look better. After some fiddling around, background done. Call this view layer background and already make the light collection. Right click view layer, disable in view layer. Make another view layer, call it lights, and enable the lights collection and disable the background collection. Now the background and the lights will be separate rendered images accessible in the compositor. Let's put the background behind our image. Add the background view layer and add bloom by blurring the emission, add it on top. If you have problems with the emission path in Eevee, don't forget to put the material settings to opaque. Then mix the background behind the pic using the mask from the keying as factor. Two things really look bad. The green spill, these green little parts on the corners, and the disconnectedness of both layers. First, the green spill is quite easy to remove. Put the color spill node in and already it looks much nicer. Second, we make a light wrap to have the background communicate to the foreground elements a little bit. First, we take the mask, invert it, and blur it a little bit. Then we multiply with the uninverted mask to obtain a gradient around the contours. The blur controls the thickness of the gradient. Then we multiply with the blurred background to get the colored rim and add to the dispilled photo. Voila! And here we see the background light cast some light on the figures. In this context, this is fine. It will also look a lot better when we eventually edit lights. So let's create the lights. Go into the 3D viewport, go into the lights collection in the lights view layer. Let's create something to render for the lights. We take a plane and lights. The basic version of the plane's material is a simple diffused shader with a color at 0.5. This value will define the general brightness of the lights later. Put it on blue first, position it to get a nicer cone shape on the plane, and let's animate first. It should blink alternating to another colored lamp. I chose it to be 5 on and 2 frames off, and 2 frames for the transition where both lights colors are partly on, creating color mixtures. Use the cyclic modifier for the keyframes to repeat this animation forever. That maybe looks quite fast, but keep in mind we are animating on 2s. Duplicate the light with Alt D to get linked lights, then select all and Shift D move between the original lights and change the color to orange. Play with the cone angle and especially the blend to adjust the appearance. You might go back later and change the number of lights and position. For the wide shots, I put the light cones in the picture in the middle, approximately where the lights are. But for the closer shots, I only wanted to have the broad overlapping stripes of light. But you can also change the appearance by adjusting the plane. The diffuse value can act as a general brightness value for the result, as I mentioned before. You can plug, for example, gradients into the color to get vignette effects to emphasize parts of the image looking more brighter. This is how I produced the effect of lights shutting off before the concert. You can also play with deforming the plane, adding a loop cut and moving the bottom make the audience get more or less light from the stage. You can also bevel this edge to have a more gradual transition. Now we need a setup where our new light decides between light and darkness. For this we add one color balance, set it to offset power slope, make the color corrections we want. In this case I only reduce the brightness a little bit. Then we duplicate with Ctrl+Shift+D and put the slope to a very low value, 0.05 for example, to get a very dark underexposed version of the image. Mix both images using screen and the light view layer in the factor. I often use the color ramp set to B-spline to adjust the shape. Last but not least, you add the colored light on top. I also use screen here and a factor of 0.27, but of course adjust until it looks good for you. And then you render your nice composited relighted video. When you have the renders of all the relit shots, you can finally go to cutting the video. So take a new Blender file, learn the quirks of the VSE, maybe write a tool to get the correct aspect ratio of the picture automatically, add nice music, sound effects, and cut your story. Done! I hope you got something out of this video. Check out the whole Lego Movie 2 Black Dogs. And of course, check out martial arts album The Palette Masks Talking. Enjoy!